engagement. So we see 10 days have nearly flown by. The last day, an important day in the sense, a lot of activities, that is mini activities, have been squeezed into this particular time slot. We'll start with Professor Shabal's lecture on From the US Withdrawal to the Asianization of Afghanistan, combined with the tutorial. It will be combined with the tutorial all in one go, that is on containing chaos in Afghanistan and its neighborhood. We won't have a tea break in between. This will be followed by another important engagement, that is the discussion on the essays evaluated by Professor Shabal and graded by him. So his comments and suggestions that we all need to know and need to take care of will be presented. In fact, to each essay writer, there will be a short closing event. Professor Patnaik, the Gyan coordinator, he was to be here, but I just received a message that perhaps he's caught in some other meeting. So in any case, he would be sending a message which I'm going to read out to all of you. Thereafter, I would say something about the overall experience of this particular program. Professor Shabal will also share his impressions, and some students, maybe 2 students, could also join. Finally, there will be a group photo and then the high tea towards the end, and then all of you could go and collect, especially the ones who deserve a certificate will get their certificate. Okay, thank you so much. So over to you, Professor Shabal.
Thank you very much. My microphone friend needs to be woken up. Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. Namaste, and thank you for coming every day for the past 2 weeks and coming today for the last day. Concluding is a little like dying. We have a saying by Shakespeare, parting is such sweet sorrow. In French we say leaving is a little like dying, or is leaving is dying a little. We could play on the words to leave or to live, so leaving is also living, and we shall know that, keep in touch and meet again in this life or the next. The ambitious titles for this concluding session is from something to something else, more specifically from the withdrawal, the US withdrawal or the ISAF withdrawal, or in any case the leaving of the Afghan territory of the stabilization forces, to the process by which a space or a territory, rather than a country or a nation, a state or a space or a territory, is Asianized. That is to mean, my terminology, brought into a long-term dynamic, where the key actors, the key determinants, and the key construction, indeed, are different from the past, turning in many, many ways the page of history. The subtitle, or the title for the tutorial, is Containing Chaos in Afghanistan and its Neighborhood. Of course, chaos is a word put in inverted commas. Chaos refers to instability, although chaos is not a rude word. I mean, chaos theories is used by mathematicians and physicists to explain that what is a surprise is a negantropic trend in the world, the tendency to produce some kind of order out of disorder. So that's the a way of thinking within social sciences and hard sciences. But containing, that's the key word in this subtitle or title of the tutorial, because containing has a specific meaning in geopolitics: containment, counter-containment. And it's a better word in English than in French, because in French we say circling or encircling or counter-encircling, which has a over pragmatic or over concrete suggested meaning of a cartographic encircling of countries. To contain means to produce a dynamic whereby certain forces are limited in their effects, or certain pressures or forces or dynamics are limited in what they can actually produce. So containing forces or dynamics in or around Afghanistan and its neighborhood. And at some point, please remind me, I sent you very late a map of the continent with a different rail gauge width for the transport, and I think it's a very illuminating map. So please remind me to actually at some point put it on the screen, my dear colleagues. Thank you very much. Having said that, there is also a date mentioned in my title, the re-regionalization of Afghanistan after 2014, which is already 10 years ago. But I would stick to this date having its meaning in many, many ways. But of course, I should have added to my title the re-regionalization of Afghanistan after 2014, but there also was 2017, and there also was 2021. So dates, again, we can use as landmarks and comment upon them. But I'm interested more than in dates, in sort of trends or broad time perspectives, connoting or characterizing the dynamic we are looking at. All along, in fact, I am suggesting some sort of Afghan specificity. The word is on the whiteboard, on the screen. And I have in many, many ways over the past days indeed suggested something to be called an Afghan specificity. I did so in my conclusion to a number of chapters. I did so when I mentioned a number of points. And so there is an Afghan specificity. But comparative analysis should suggest that what I call specificity has more to do with the regional geopolitics than with the idiosyncrasies of one particular country or nation. If you think of other regions, certain territories have a specificity of a different kind. In many, many ways in the European construction, Belgium has come to have a specific relevance and meaning, not just because it hosts a number of European community institutions, but because it is located in the center, it has a history which is part of the recent European history, and so on. So neither withdrawal, nor chaos, nor specificity are words that we should resent or mind as value-laden. They are just words that I strive to use in a what Max Weber would have called a axiologically neutral way, which means a way neutral vis-à-vis values and vis-à-vis especially value judgments. Having said that, there is, in many, many ways, a concept of specificity. I'm still in my introduction to the topic of today. And the word specificity I pick up here from the literature on geopolitics, from a French geographer called Joyaux, who wrote a number of books pointing to the specificity of Asia. So in his writings, it's East Asia. And basically, he says that Asia is specific because if you draw lines characterizing two sorts of Asias for different reasons, the line is almost the same. If you draw the line in terms of maritime or terrestrial geopolitics, the line goes, west to east, with more or less, to simplify, China, Russia to one side, and India and the Indo-Malay world to the other. If you draw the same line in terms of civilizational characteristics, Sino-culture or Sino-heritage in terms of philosophy or language or so on, is to the north, and then if you to the south is Hindi and the Indo-Malay civilizations again. If you draw the same line for the Cold War according to three very different logics, then, and we can't do so as easily elsewhere in the world, there is a specificity for Asia. And the next question, we don't have time for, is to say if there is a specificity, we should devise a specific methodology to understand Asia, different from the methodology needed to understand other regions. So this is what the word specificity means. And for Afghanistan, we have a number of ways in which to suggest that there is a specificity. Afghanistan has been for a long time at the crossroad of empires over the long historical time. It is the heartland of Mackinder, even though Mackinder, as you notice, perhaps does not name countries. The heartland is the center of the continent, but it's not named. It is the specific nexus of logistics. We've mentioned this many, many times. It is a specific place when it comes to some traffics or some radicalizations and things to do with the modern socio-political or socio-economic open or underground realities. And it is a very much a, I hope the word will be accepted by you, a coveted member of the new Asia. And there are a number of texts that I found again recently. If you Google the words Afghanistan and SCO, you will find a number of articles coming up very quickly. One we printed this morning, and another one which I had on my phone, but now I'm disconnected from the internet, so I can't find it again. Regards the title is Russia's conditional support towards Afghanistan's SCO membership. So you can either spot the word conditional, there are conditions expressed by Russia, or the word support in terms, or the word indeed SCO membership for Afghanistan, which I think in many ways has been in the air, in the pipeline since 2014. This is why this date I stick to in my introduction. So the question that we are asking today, or the questions that we are asking today, are relevant to some extent, irrespective of the dates, or to some extent throughout the period that begins in the early 21st century, 2001, or 4 or 5, depending on how we look at it, and still relevant today. So how and why, and more specifically, the 4 paragraphs suggest, very briefly, that there is a case for reflecting upon the concept of disengagement of international forces in Afghanistan. I call it the West, but of course we agree that the concept of the West should be discussed for a long time. As a consequence of the disengagement, there is an engagement, that's paragraph 2, into the new Asia. And so I play on the words to suggest a almost geometrical, symmetrical force, counter-force, or direction, counter-direction dynamic in which I believe. Point 3, paragraph 3, we'll be looking at the hard security hypotheses that have been aired or suggested for the security of Afghanistan. And paragraph 4, with a very French title, down to earthing, I don't know if it's correct English language, suggesting that the key question today regarding Afghanistan is concrete steps on the ground, logistical steps, much more than, as important as, in my view, as high diplomacy, high politics, high negotiations. So that's my self-imposed duty to cover all these points. First point, what I call the disengagement of the West, has been a long or lasting disengagement of the West. It dragged for a number of years, and so there has been in that case maybe both an acceleration of history in 2001 and then a deceleration of history over the following 20 years. 20 years is a long time, I've said so before to you. It's too long a time to connote or qualify an intervention. 20 years is a presence, is a structuring or middle-term way of influencing or weighing on the evolution or development of a country. An intervention, a stabilization intervention, I'm not a military man, but I suppose it would take a few weeks or months or perhaps a little more. But so the duration is relevant in many ways. And I've said to you that I committed a small text to the colleagues in Kazakhstan once when I was covering 2 points. Why intervene in Afghanistan? That was the obvious point. And then why remain so long in Afghanistan was my second point in my text. So what I'm suggesting is that we equate the time factors and try to notice, as I've said to you before, that the hesitation, what I call the hesitation to leave Afghanistan after 2001 for about 20 years, this hesitation makes sense because it is a moment when the withdrawal of Afghanistan is envisaged and perhaps inevitable, and eventually it took place. But this disengagement is a disengagement referring back to the long history. And so my reasoning, as I've said to you before, is that once it has taken place, this disengagement from Afghanistan, there will be a long time after that, and probably as long as the time period where the West was engaged, during which the West will no longer be engaged. So how long was the West engaged in that part of the world? 2 centuries, a bit more, a bit less, depends how we account. But certainly since the moment when the two empires, British and Russian, met in that part of the world in the 1850s, 60s, then there were imperial clashes and confrontations, and then the agreements to turn the country into a buffer zone. So if we go back to that time in history, a little less than 200 years, not my guess, but my constructed and argumented hypothesis is that there would be at least 2 centuries during which the key influence in Afghanistan will be Asian or the new Asian, and indeed properly Afghan. So that's how I explain the concept of Asianization set within the time factor of the long term to come. I'm sure we'll have a discussion about that. And so when we come to the nature of the Western presence or the ISAF presence in Afghanistan, the nature of it has to do more with time, as far as I'm concerned, has more to do with the depth or solidity of the presence of the West or of the New Asia than with the, properly speaking, military operations. Because the original aim, 2001, was to stabilize the country. And that aim was not only not fully reached in many, many ways, but in 2021, when the withdrawal took place, the last one, some words used to justify the withdrawal was that the original aim was not to bring, I forget the exact words, I should have checked my sources, but the exact words were that the 2001 intervention was not designed to bring about a certain type of institutions or certain type of democratic institutions, and this was almost, it was very different from the rhetorics used in 2001. And certainly to justify the withdrawal, it was said that indeed the fate of Afghanistan should be in the hands of the Afghans and not under the influence of other forces. So I would suggest to you that we should, however paradoxical it might seem, view the dynamics in Afghanistan over the past 20 years much more in terms of the long-term history than in terms of specific military operations. My point to finish paragraph 1 is that in my terminology, in the geopolitical sense, the recent withdrawal from Afghanistan is irreversible, or at least a structural dynamic, not a conjectural one. As a link between paragraph 1 and paragraph 2, I would like to suggest again that there are other ways to look at Afghanistan besides the usual ways to do with the regime, the instability, and other aspects which the analysts and the journalists put forth predominantly. There are other ways, which is the role, the economic role, the resources present in Afghanistan. There are vast riches in the Afghan underground space. Afghanistan is very rich for copper, for example, and the Aynak copper mines have long been the object of a partnership with China. And Afghanistan also has some energy in its underground space, and also some rare metals. So there is also a case for analyzing the economic mining relevance of Afghanistan in the context of the region organizing itself with the neighbors in terms of becoming an economic actor. Paragraph 2 is engaging Afghanistan into the new Asia. So what can be said about the Asianization or the proximization of one country or nation or regime with existing organizations or dynamics, multilateral dynamics in the region? I'll begin with a small anecdote, and then I cover 3 possible scenarios associating Afghanistan directly or indirectly with other dynamics. The anecdote is that in 2007, so almost 20 years ago, I remember that in Uzbekistan, the issue of whether Afghanistan could one day become more than an observer more than a member of the contact group with the SCO, maybe an observer, maybe a member, so on and so on. And the reaction of colleagues, whether they were Uzbeks, but that's not the main point, was to say impossible. Afghanistan cannot join organizations or multilateral dynamics in the region. It's too unstable. And the answer to that sort of reaction was to say, not immediately, but in due course. Now, whatever in due course means, in due course, Afghanistan logically should be, will be, has to be part of multilateral dynamics for its own sake, in the sense that, as I've explained for the past 2 weeks, every country is, in the recent history, drawn into regional multilateral dynamics, but also because it is the interest of the neighbors to have Afghanistan somehow a part of their construction. And if you look at the map, now every neighbor of Afghanistan is a member of the SCO. Let's see if I've done my homework. China, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Iran, Pakistan. Am I? Yes, correct. They're all members of the SCO. That is not determinant, but it's a fact which at least symbolically speaking, suggests that Afghan membership makes more and more sense. Having said that, there are 3 points on the screen, which begins with the SCO Afghanistan Contact Group, formed in 2005, which mentions the relevance of the RATS activities regarding, of course, anti-terrorist efforts, and many of them looking at the south or southeast, because not only Afghanistan but some other terrorist groups operate from that part of the continent, but also the SCO. The suggestion that the security of Afghanistan was so important that it could be part of a joint effort of the SCO and NATO. This was actually suggested about 10 years ago, and I suggested to one of my students to write a little piece on that, because it was, on the one hand, a paradox, if the SCO was labeled as an anti-NATO dynamic, to suggest that the two could work together, but it was really an interesting suggestion which was kept alive for some years almost, in the sense that the SCO is definitely more legitimate in the region to operate, but it's not a military organization, and NATO is less legitimate. It's a projected form of a presence under the UN umbrella, but still. But it is a military organization equipped with more operational capabilities than the SCO. And of course, the SCO exercises, military exercises, cannot be held in Afghanistan because it's not a member. So we have, from this first point, a first hypothesis, which is the hypothesis where, I repeat, SCO and NATO could somehow grasp together the issue of security or stability in Afghanistan. But other suggestions were made. One was the SCO-CSTO form of cooperation over the issue of Afghanistan, and this is again an interesting suggestion to combine or to have Afghanistan be a sort of medium or substance for what exists in any case. The SCO-CSTO joint military exercises, the SCO, CSTO possibly merging of the secretariat and perhaps one day of the two organizations. So again, we have here a sort of vast movement of reflection whether two organizations could collaborate more formally, and the substance of that cooperation, which could be the security or stability of Afghanistan. And last, there was also a suggestion that the SCO and the Eurasian Economic Union would somehow be able to cooperate regarding Afghanistan, one being a security organization, the other one being an economic cooperation or even integration to some extent organization, because Afghanistan needs more than only security and stability. It needs prosperity, development, and economic dynamics. So why do I say over the Chinese membership? Just to suggest that there are, of course, some neighbors which are newer to the issue of Afghanistan, and this is part of the quote-unquote rediscovery of the common Chinese-Afghan border in the recent decades. So the main point of this paragraph 2 is to suggest that, how can I phrase it, that the Afghan factor is one which crystallizes, which brings together a number of initiatives or suggestions in all directions. In other words, whether in a hard military sense or in the less hard, more open security sense, or in the economic sense, or in the trading sense, in whatever way, there is a way in which the centrality, the specificity or the centrality of Afghanistan is there. It's unavoidable. It's part of the dynamic, and we don't have time for that now. But I would be happy to suggest that when we look at the continent of the New Asia, there are 2 or 3, possibly 4 specific locations which contain, in a very intense manner, a number of determinants, a number of possible evolutions. You could call these 3 or 4 specific locations hotspots. But if we do, then we draw attention to the risk of instability escalation. If we call them points of the focus of attention and of innovation in the dynamics, then we have in mind more what I wish to draw. The next paragraph is called the post-2014 delays and the NATO-SCO hypothesis. So I will not dwell so much on the SCO-NATO hypothesis because I have done so already. But I would like to draw your attention and to discuss perhaps later on the issue of the delays. The 3 dates I mentioned before, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was suggested in the early 2010s that there should be a withdrawal or partial withdrawal of international troops from Afghanistan. This was partially realized in 2014 in 2 ways. Some contingents left Afghanistan, the French one, if I'm not mistaken, and some other European contingents, but some other contingents remained. There was a difference introduced in the vocabulary between combat troops and non-combat troops. So combat troops would be supposed to leave and withdraw according to a calendar. Non-combat troops could remain and act perhaps as separating belligerents or somehow logistically ensuring the stability of the country. But the common word to combat troops and non-combat troops is troops. So it's the military presence of foreign forces, and that continued. Although there was a gradual or a partial withdrawal in 2014. And in 2017, what happened is that there was a substantial re-increase of the presence of some foreign troops, US troops in particular, and so the signal was blurred. The signal of disengagement emitted in 2011, partially realized in 2014, was blurred by the 2017 advancement, so to speak, of foreign military presence. And of course came the 2021 final withdrawal, which was heralded as maybe logical, but disorganized in many ways. And it's a surprise within the surprise that the withdrawal should be, it seemed, I don't really believe it was, but it seemed to some extent unplanned. With the consequence that between 2001 and today, the issue of stability and instability has not really much progressed. I'm a little simplistic here, but what has progressed is the other dynamic, which is the regional, multilateral Asianization dynamic of the country with the neighbors. And in the meantime, here again comes the contextual analysis. In the meantime, 2001 to 2021 and today, so much has happened elsewhere in the region by way of SCO observers, SCO dialogue partners, same region anymore. It's in a way the same region. There is still an Afghan specificity and a difficulty to build multilateral programs. We mentioned TAPI many times, and I will again. But so TAPI is one factor of the suspension of TAPI is the situation in Afghanistan. So some things remain, but so many other things have changed by way of the context or surrounding or environment of Afghanistan. And whether we draw the attention to what has not changed more negatively, or whether we draw it to what has changed more positively, you understood that I am in favor of the second attitude. So, to paragraph 4 now, to be on time, what I call the down-to-earth, or the down-to-earthing question for Afghanistan, and how what was called elsewhere at some other time the small steps approach, the small steps policy seems to me to make more sense. What do I mean by small steps? I mean the way in which, faced with a very difficult international diplomatic hard security situation or tension, and the example I have in mind is the inter-German relation and the Cold War, the small steps, whatever facilitates, not politically or diplomatically, but concretely, economically, and even as regards the individual families and so on, what facilitates the normalization, the humanization of the question is at least as important as the high politics. Has there been high politics and high diplomacy regarding Afghanistan in the last 20 years? Yes. How many conferences have taken place in Geneva, in Berlin, in Paris, in Astana, in almost one international conference, peace conference a year. So much more than a dozen conferences. But there also has been, and less talked about, some what I call small steps realization, and I wish to draw our attention to a number of them. One is the railway connection, and perhaps we could then put the map on the screen. Do you have it? Yes, okay. I think now would be the moment to put the railway map on the screen. So that we can characterize the specificity of Afghanistan also by way of rail transport. The one country that has invested substantial amounts of money, Uzbekistan, into the building of railway links from Uzbekistan to Kabul, or almost reaching Kabul, which is, of course, in the extremely directly relevant interest of Afghanistan to be isolated, so to speak. Of course, there is no such thing as a free and generous gesture on the part of a country. Uzbekistan does so because that's part of Uzbekistan's much larger scale scheme to connect its territory to the Middle East and to complete the railway network leading to and going from Uzbekistan to a number of other countries as well. But this 35 kilometers or 40 kilometers, whatever, of railway constructed or modernized or equipping Uzbekistan is an extremely important, concrete, small step to normalize, disengage, connect, relate the country to other ways. The same applies to electricity grids, the construction of power lines, something as simple as that. As important as the production of electricity, which can be done in a number of ways. Once it's produced, how do you transport it? This is the issue connected to the first one, because railways need electricity to run trains. And globally speaking, all the infrastructural constructions of Afghanistan are a small step way to engage, normalize, facilitate exchanges with the country. Despite its very difficult geomorphology, climate, mountain ranges, and so on and so forth. So I don't know how things are progressing at present and how they have progressed over the past 10 to 20 years, but Uzbekistan was early and actively, and to some extent generously, active in that direction. The second point is the TAPI initiative. And it was, I think, at some point called, the French love to play on words, but the tapping of resources. But anyway, TAP or TAPI, the difference is your country. But this scheme, we've mentioned many times before, it's on hold or it's not progressing as fast as it could. But it obviously is one of the keys to one of the few major geopolitical or geoeconomic or geologistical stakes of the century, how to connect the Caspian Sea area to the open seas. And the shortest way and the more logical way and the more Asian way is through the territories situated between Turkmenistan and India. So, and the TAPI geopolitical dynamic whether it is a rail link or a road link or a pipeline link makes a difference, but it doesn't make a fundamental difference in the sense that it is a way to connect and to relate countries which have not hitherto in history, according to my definitions, been the object of such links and the connections. It is in the interest of each of the countries concerned to be actively connected by TAPI. Turkmenistan would desisolate in many ways or diversify its export routes. Afghanistan would be normalized or crossed, and of course deriving revenues from that situation. The same for Pakistan, and of course India would be then forming a sort of what do I call it in some of my essays, an arch of countries, or an axis, not axis in the same sense as yesterday, but in the classic sense. But anyway, so this is also something which is, if you look at the past 20 years, the TAP or TAPI initiative was at some times heralded as the, not the perfect, but at least the brilliant solution or the obvious one that was in the making. Then something commented upon as being impossible due to a number of factors, and something which should be looked at with nostalgia as being of the past, but no longer of the present, and impossible in the future, or still possible. But I think it's one of the discussions which will remain on the table. However, it evolves over time. So this map is very simplistic, but very illuminating as to the specificity of Afghanistan, not yet equipped. Of course, this is an old map, but now things have changed. But not yet equipped. It's white. It's devoid of railways. The same with Nepal. And beyond the geomorphological reasons, the rest has to do with the ways in which three different norms existed: the Russian one, the British one, and the what's the third one? The Chinese one. So this is a way to suggest that either it's impossible to connect really because the gauge width is so different that it's very complicated to take the wagons off the wheels, change the wheels, and put the wagons back on the wheels. We had this in Europe for many years between France and Spain. We had to stop the train, change the gauge. But now there are new mechanisms that facilitate this. It's a gauge system with a spring in it, so it can be enlarged, and the wagons remain on the gauge, on the wheels, but the wheels are they're just lifted a little bit. The wheels are changed, and they're dropped down on the wheels again. So technically, things are becoming easier. But the stake is who is going to win over, so to speak, the market or the contract equipping Afghanistan with railways. So technically, once it's connected, it won't make any difference, but symbolically or diplomatically, that would be a great victory. And so the answer can be one of the three. Incidentally, Russia, China, or India representing the three norms here on the map, or a collaboration among these three countries, obviously involving countries situated between Russia and Afghanistan, Central Asia, or countries situated between. No, basically that's a concern for Russia. And the third point I've indicated as, can we go back to the document there? The social policies as a solution or as a test to the stabilization of Afghanistan. I think this is where the small steps policy applies even more. That any measure that facilitates the concrete daily life of people by way of employment, revenue, income, housing, and so on, is a way to stabilize the situation. In Europe, we had this between the two Germanys, and we had, I think, in the chronology, a very interesting moment when, in 1972, the Germans invented what they called the West Germans called it the Ostpolitik, the Eastern policy, making it possible, despite the Cold War divide, for families to exchange mail, to telephone, and to visit each other to some extent. So to normalize the situation, the inter-German situation. And in my analysis, this paves the way, 1972, for the 1975 Helsinki process and East-West normalization And I see the Helsinki process as the preparation of the end of the Cold War. Although time elapsed between 75 and 89, 90. But so anything that prepares, normalizes, humanizes a situation and makes it possible to develop in socioeconomic terms the lives of citizens in that country, Afghanistan, and also in neighboring areas, is a way to diffuse instability and perhaps social, what Bentley called social anger, or extreme socioeconomic human needs. In other words, to inject some degree of real life solutions in addition to high diplomatic or high political treatment. So I'm aware that I may sound either naive and over-optimistic, or I may sound ignorant of certain factors that suggest an opposite evolution for the country. But my conclusion here is to suggest that there will be, there should be, or there will be change, solution, improvement, normalization, stabilization of the situation in and around Afghanistan. Be it only because of geopolitical interests, and in the same way as I say, with perhaps much naivety, that there will be, there should be, and there must be someday a solution for the Korean Peninsula, that the division makes absolutely no sense in terms of international politics. Well, it does make sense in terms of international politics, the Cold War, but not in terms of Korean politics. And it is against the interests of both Koreas to be divided, and to some extent, I think, against the interests of the continental neighbors, China and Russia. To substantiate my point, let me say for Korea one thing, that often the Korean War is called the Korean War, and I call it the Cold War in Korea, I've told you before, but it's labeled as a civil war, as if the history of Koreans was a history of two entities, two kingdoms, or two societies mounting up to a civil war. But the history of Korea is not a two-nation or two-community confrontation. It's a 3 or 4 kingdom history. The 3 kingdoms, Shilla, Paekche, and Koryo, and then Goguryeo, fought each other for a long time. They managed to defeat the 4th one, Kaya, which was a smaller one, and to expel it elsewhere, to ban the kingdom. But the history of Korea is the history of 3 kingdoms, and eventually one taking over the others, becoming Goguryeo, incidentally expanding into Manchuria quite a lot. So it's not a history of a bipartisan or a dichotomic or bipolar history. Similarly, the history of Afghanistan is not a history of isolation. It's a history of it being a crossroad. It's a history of being a link at the time of the Silk Roads, the old Silk Roads, and in many other ways. Afghanistan has become a specific buffer territory in many ways due to recent international politics. And by recent, I mean 200 years, or perhaps a little less. That's long compared to today and tomorrow, but it's short enough compared to the history of the continent. So that was my presentation, which is now over. And I would conclude by suggesting, I don't know if the words are proper or humane enough, that in many ways, rather than to say that the situation in Afghanistan is a test, or one of the tests for the new Asia, because the word test is a bit of a condescending terminology, I would suggest that the situation in Afghanistan is one of the ways in which the new Asia will be revealed. There will be a revelator. Afghanistan, and for that matter Korea, or maybe some situations, is called to reveal the new Asia to itself, to bring about and to suggest, first through an awareness, secondly through small steps or big steps, and finally through a operationalization, developmental dynamic, it will reveal the New Asia to itself. Now, of course, we'll come back to the concept of New Asia. We can discuss this for a long time. But New Asia is, if I not improvise, but if I formulate without notes a sort of definition, it's a space. It's part of a continent, not necessarily the whole continent, but a substantial part of the continent that is operating and dynamizing today. By today, I mean the last few decades, in a way which is novel, in a way which is an innovation. I stick to that point, that the key word for region building in the modern times, the building of modern international regions, is the capacity to innovate. Innovation, innovate, creation, invention, more than patching up from the past or adapting the past. Thank you very much for your patience. So what's the program? Questions immediately, or then and then some? Okay, I'm in your hands. You. Okay. The time is 11:20.
So this is the grade sheet.
Yes.
After the tutorial questions, you can go for this, and then the validity will start.
Okay. So, there are usual jokes that one can use when there are no questions, but I will refrain. I'm sure there are some questions, or some remarks, and fundamentally some disagreements with what I've been saying to you. I haven't dodged too many questions so far. I haven't avoided too many difficult terms or dimensions, but of course I have, I'm sure, looked at some. Well, if you don't fire away, then we could mention this article, which is a recent one, published in 2022 by the Observer Research Foundation, which I believe is located in India. Am I correct? Yes? And it's entitled A House Divided, the SCO's Afghanistan Conundrum. So somebody else is thinking that Afghanistan is relevant to the discussion. And it's a long, very substantial article, well referenced and well documented, which contains indeed the views, as far as I read it, that not only is Afghanistan relevant to the situation of the New Asia, but that India and Pakistan have a specific role to play. The Chinese approach being labeled narrow, the Russian and Central Asian republics being suggested as classic, and the Indian and Pakistani dimensions being suggested as more innovating. And more specifically in this article, which I hope you will read, is a table on page 6, which details the SCO counterterrorism documents that have been adopted in the sense that there is an active, almost yearly adoption of decisions and policies regarding the specific issue of counterterrorism activities in the region. So let's open discussion about the specificity as a concept and the specificity of Afghanistan as a priority of diplomacy or actions.
Hello, Professor. I just have a comment, particularly on providing an Indian perspective that India is certainly one which is in favor of Afghanistan being a member of of the SCO. Taking the model which you presented when you presented how Turkey and Iran are going to be a classical and real assets, contemporary assets for the SCO. Afghanistan being a member of SCO have like a three-way benefits for India: it's political, cartographical, and economic benefits. Politically, a stable regime in Afghanistan would help us in counter-terrorism, particularly when Afghan and India being in between. There is Pakistan, which we don't have very good relations with. So a good stable regime in Afghanistan might or would rather help us in counter-terrorism. Cartographically, Afghanistan is the gateway for India, can be a gateway, or I would rather say is in near future is the only possible hopeful gateway for India to the Central Asia, which is energy rich and resource rich and is rather essential for India to secure. And another three major projects: one is Chabara Link Trade Route Project, the port, and is the International North-South Transition Corridor, Trade Corridor rather, and the much waited, much needed, and much elongated TAPI project, which is rather very essential for India, and there are problems in Turkey due to Afghanistan's dormant nature, particularly due to political instability, and Pakistan also. So Afghanistan being a member of SCO, permanent member of SCO, is close then compared to Turkey and Turkey, because Afghanistan is already an observer state, and India have been investing in Afghanistan and had been a long friend of Afghanistan. So rather say the figures which I have is that India in past I would say in the beginning of 21st century till now have invested more than 750 million US dollars in Afghanistan, more than 500 projects in Afghanistan in terms of energy, water, conservation, environment, have been funded and sponsored by India. So I would say my comment is that simply Afghanistan membership is not only will not only help India, but its very membership is backed by India. India wants it to be a permanent member more than Turkey. So that's one. And I also have a question.
Okay,
yes,
let's say one at a time. Thank you for your question, because we agree. I use the term for Turkey and Iran of the interface between the New Asia and Europe, or the West of Europe, and I stick to that concept. It's a concept interface, to which I would be more than happy to add Turkmenistan, and I've done so in many ways, except that at present Turkmenistan's foreign policy is one of neutrality and therefore non-engagement or minimal engagement. For Afghanistan, the concept could be also interface, or a lock, or a crossroad, or a link, or a indispensable part of the chain of the terrestrial or land dynamics connecting India to Central Asia. So I agree, and what I like in your question in particular is the fact that we are onto a geopolitical discussion. We in this class, as I've said many times, we leave aside questions to do with population, society, socioeconomic events, but in geopolitical terms, in many ways, let me use a term that is not easy to use, but the term solution. Afghanistan could prove also a solution to a number of locks or blockages, not only a problem, I say, is one where regime dynamics play little roles. If you look at any country you might have in mind, and by long term I mean a few centuries, the issue of regimes, leaders, majorities when it's democracy, or royal families when it's a kingdom, have much less relevance than the long-term interests, preoccupations, sometimes obsessions of the country as such. I use this way of reasoning for the Russian maritimization constant in its geopolitics for 500 years. And when we talked for China of the past century and the present century, irrespective of regimes and leaders, China will continue to want to level off with the rest of the world, And if you think of other countries, which party president is in power doesn't really change the long-term policies of the country. In terms of energy geopolitics, the USA has had two priorities, one expressed in the late 19th century and one that changed about 20 years ago regarding the issue of being a net importer or net exporter. If you think of the long-term priorities of France or of any country, it's a long-term thing. So that's why, at the risk of sounding simplistic, for Afghanistan, you and I and others focus on, long-term, broad and major geopolitical things. What is at stake is whether Afghanistan and other portions will be solutions to the formation of the new Asia as a continental entity, as a contiguous continental entity, or whether there will be a need for a maritime link here and there. For example, the India-Iran link as part of the North-South corridor. Thank you for your, as usual, dense question. And the second one, and then I'll take yours.
The second one is more brief and clear. Since we are on day 10, what are your prospects on future of SEO, particularly next 7-10 years, and what are the key areas of focus? Realistically, it's not like
my own focus.
One should be. It's not like one should be focusing on this, and that. What do you think SEO must be focusing on?
In other words, what your own research might be in the next 5-10 years in publications. Yes, this is what I have in mind. Because in 5-10 years, I'll probably still alive, but less young. Well, to phrase it, 2 or 3 answers that come to my mind. To phrase it in classic terminology, the SEO at some point will balance out enlargement with a deepening. So enlargement to new affiliates has been extremely rapid, almost a doubling of affiliates, which is my term for observers, members, and partners. At some point, there is a need to deepen, in other words, to improve the formalizations or the structuring capacity of common actions, common programs of actions. Common policies, I don't think the term applies. The other direction is all that will confirm the capacity of the SEO to build Asia for itself and not be targeted at other competitors in the world. And I think that's part of the rhetoric of the SEO. I've said so before. And possibly along with that, along with the capacity of the SEO, the first one, to deepen, to improve its multilateralization of decisions and programs, the decision-making mode might evolve from a consensus to majority or unanimity. In many ways, this is a moment, at least for European, but I don't want to think in European terms, but of the maturing of the way in which a union or a common or a community works. In Europe, we have 2 or 3 different modes of decision making. We have the majority one, we have the qualified majority one, we have the minority one, we have when we have unanimity as well. We have a right of veto. So we've arranged types of decisions in 3 or 4 categories. So we have in that sense 3 or 4 different decision-making mechanisms. And possibly this will change in an organization such as the SEO and others, ASEAN and other organizations, or the CSTO. The CSTO is a good example where the decision-making mode has changed, that I've explained to you many times. So that's part of possible. But the third, I think, and more significant direction is what I call the small steps, the capacity of the SEO or other organizations to tackle and improve measures affecting directly the lives of citizens or the socio-economic life, not just the diplomatic and military hard security questions. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir, for engaging here for the almost 10 days. Very intense.
Thank you for coming for 10 days.
And for the last 10 days, actually, I could have, with my limited understanding, that the concept of New Asia can be materialized in future through the market forces only, as my limited understanding is there, through the economic initiatives or through the market of the neoliberal things. Within the same framework of SEO, do you think, because the role of Afghanistan and the geopolitical situation of Afghanistan, I mean, which is very crucial for not only for this century but for the previous centuries as well. So, I mean, it's my personal opinion that is it unwanted spot of your concept of New Asia that you're proposing, and with the analysis of for the last 10 days. Academic discussion, I'm fully convinced that New Asia is possible within the framework within the SEO framework that we have already given the argument. So, is the Afghanistan is only unwanted spot?
Unwanted? No.
Yes.
Unwanted.
Unwanted spot.
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 What do you mean by unwanted spot? I don't understand the concept.
I mean, it may be Afghanistan may be the only place where actually this the concept of New Asia can. I mean, it's more problematic in that sense because.
So could Afghanistan be left out of the New Asia? That's the question.
No,
Or will it be left out?
might
Whether
be
it wants
left
to-
out,
right,
but maybe I mean it will be a major hurdle of this.
Okay, so the short answer to will Afghanistan will want to remain out or will be kept out? Short answer is no. And the same answer applies to North Korea and Korea, as I tried to make clear. I'm less familiar with the Middle East, but I'm sure you can find some solutions where countries cannot be left out. Some tension problem must be solved before the region begins to make sense. So that's the question, does a region make sense without this or that country or nation? And I think the answer is no. Of course, there are always exceptions. Look at Europe, we have two marked exceptions, Switzerland and Norway. One has a key resource which is banking and finance and money, and the other one has a key resource which is energy and oil and gas. Are they left out? Are they kept out? Yes. Do they want to be left out? Yes. Does Europe make sense without them? Yes, to a large extent, but symbolically speaking, the territory of Switzerland is surrounded by members, so it is doubly isolated. So that doesn't prevent a global dynamic from taking place, but it makes it incomplete. In the case of Afghanistan, of course, we are talking about a country which is neither as rich financially as Switzerland or neither as rich as Norway in terms of energy. But in addition, I think the history of the territory by way of trade routes, the location of the territory today in terms of exports, imports, is such that the country cannot be left out. It would make no sense. And you mentioned India as in favor of Afghanistan membership of the SEO. We found sources on the Russian favoring that scenario as well. We would need to know the position of China. And China, this is my guess, would also be in favor of the membership of Afghanistan, so long as it feels it's not diluting its proximity with Afghanistan. If others, so to speak, come into the picture through the membership. That's a short answer. It's not very short, but that's a short answer. But it might be the case that a country remains out. Afghanistan or Turkmenistan, and if the New Asia extends more, perhaps North Korea will remain out. So we'll have a situation between South Korea and China resembling one between India and Iran. So things, anything is possible. Diplomats and politicians and treaties were invented for providing solutions. Some solutions, in that sense, are always easy diplomatically speaking, but they make more or less sense in terms of the logistical and material aspects. The last sort of answer is a question to you and to all of us, looking back at history, 100 years, 500 years, 1,000 years, so on. What was the role of the territory of Afghanistan? First of all, it was a different territory. It's changed over time. Borders have changed, empires have changed, and so on. Kingdoms have changed. But I believe, in many, many ways, that what existed in the past somehow makes sense always, and makes renewed sense when the context changes, fundamentally speaking. And the context in Asia has changed, fundamentally speaking. The Cold War is no longer there to establish totally artificial borders between two blocks. The imperial times have completely gone, at least the foreign imperial times have completely changed. So in a sense, we are back, at least intellectually, to the former, more distant past of what kingdoms and empires were at that time. And at that time, the concept of the isolation of Afghanistan was non-existent. So I'm optimistic by character, and I'm optimistic by geopolitical hypothesis. And of course, we are aware that for Afghanistan, as for any other country, SCO membership will not solve overnight all problems. Thank you. Yes, you all. If you could move down a little,
Or maybe you could come a little forward.
a few meters. Let's build the new pedagogical EURASIAN. Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much for such insightful sessions in the last few days. My question to you is, how has the US decade-long involvement in Afghanistan, including its strategic use of the region during the Cold War and the 9/11 and post 9/11, contributed to destabilization and eventual return of Taliban? And what does this signify about the failure of international intervention in upholding human rights, particularly women's rights? Additionally, how should regional organizations like SCO should work to address the conflicting values of non-intervention and urgent needs to ensure stability in the region?
Your question, as in the previous days, is a very difficult one, always. How can I answer you? Well, first of all, by saying that rightly or wrongly, we leave the domestic socioeconomic questions out of the discussion, not because they don't matter, but because they are not part of the course and I have less competence looking at them. But what you suggest as part of the humanistic, sociological, equalization of genders and individuals as one dynamic can only be improved when the country is a partner to multilateral organizations and dynamics, when the country is open and there are exchanges and exports, imports. When life is more thriving and international, things change in countries. Isolation makes possible certain types of conservatism. Openness, I think, goes in the other direction. The other answer I wish to make, maybe 1 or 2 points. Point 1 is that, we don't have time for that now, but I do in my geopolitics class, and I begin with this. Let's reflect upon one form of connection. What is the connection between the 11th of September 2001 attacks on the USA, and within 3 weeks, the deployment and intervention in Afghanistan? What is the connection? I mean, how does an event in the north of America produce an intervention in the middle of Asia? The causal link, and I press my students to think with me when I start this class, and we have a number of explanations. One explanation which I eventually come up with is to say that the apparent paradox of intervening 11,000 kilometers away from Washington and New York within 3 weeks. That 3 weeks is a short time to deploy massive military troops, 3 weeks or 1 month. The one possible connection or the one possible explanation is that there is a specificity regarding Afghanistan. And that specificity led in that case to a massive intervention, a lasting intervention by a number of countries situated elsewhere. And so the specificity we can spend time on, but only one specificity, which I conclude my introduction with usually in my class, is to say that Afghanistan is on the route from the Caspian Sea to the open seas. And that route somehow, for different actors at different times, different forms of agreements, is so relevant. Whoever can suggest to export the Azeri oil, the Azeri oil and the Turkmen gas to the world markets, whoever can make it possible, can control it, can derive revenue from it, it is one of the key geopolitical questions that explains the situation of Afghanistan in 2001 and since then. Your other questions is too rich, so I think we should meet again next year and in 5 years' time and in 10 years' time to answer all the points. But thank you very much for the vividness of yours and all of yours reactions. Thank you.
One last question we can take before you start the discussion on the essays.
So before the discussion on the essays, I'll have to have some water or tea to refresh my makeup.
One last question, in case you have, or
But it's good that in reaction to my mention of Uzbek's investments in Afghanistan, you mentioned Indian investments in Afghanistan. So in the sense that investments, initiatives, concrete initiatives, down to earth or small steps, initiatives are exactly what is necessary. There are limits to high diplomacy, there are limits to hard security or military mechanisms. What is always necessary is what I call small steps or more modest, down-to-earth socioeconomic modes. So any forms of investments. In fact, again, some anecdotes. Maybe you are tired of my anecdotes, but they are part of my life. A long time ago now, it was probably 10, 15 years ago. In one class, I said it was a class on negotiations, and so I said to my students, I let you free to pick up a case, to pick up sort of a topic, and you can present a topic regarding where you would like to go once you have your master's degree in whatever it was, trade or international trade. Where would you like to go and invest or develop your business and sort of start a new initiatives? And they replied, Afghanistan. And we would like to create or open a hotel resort and restaurant resort in Afghanistan. So I said, are you aware of the difficulties at present of the geopolitics and the military situation and the socio-economic situation? Yes, precisely, because that would be a way for us to improve or to play a role regarding the economy of the country, regarding the population of the country. And in our hotel, we would employ mostly women, and we'd open as part of the hotel a kindergarten for the women's children, and so the rest of it. And that was 15 years ago. And so I said, would you not prefer to invest in Brazil or in Senegal or in maritime coastal China or India? So, no, it's better business to go to a country which is undergoing difficulties, because that's where the potential for improvement, the potential for growth, not only in the financial sense, but the potential for an impact is greater. And so I was surprised. And then they went on to do the research, and then they came back with a presentation with the PowerPoints and diagrams and things. It was interesting. So I think the conclusion should be that a country, in this case today Afghanistan, is always two things. It's a specific illustration, it's a specific case. It's one with characteristics that are different from elsewhere, but it is also part of a comparability or a comparative necessity or a comparability with other types of cases. And I'm sure without much effort, I've mentioned the Korean Peninsula, but I've mentioned the Middle East, we can find 2 or 3 or 4 locations in this vast Asian continent where similar geopolitical blockages or locks exist and called to be unlocked at some point. I stop speaking.
Now we come your assignments.
So I think, now where's the, the grades, but where's my page with the comments on the essays? The only essential document.
You must have written, right? Handwritten?
Give me a few minutes to gather my thoughts. Here. Otherwise, we could have used the metaphor of the grain of sand in the mechanism and things like this. So this is one occasion for me to say I should have learned to say no. I should have learned to say no to marking essays, and I should have learned to say no to commenting upon essays, which is an impossible task. I have said yes, so I've done my grading work. It's not grading actually, because how can I grade essays written within a few days by students I don't know on topics they have had only a few days and 1,000 words to discuss? It's difficult. I have noticed a few essays of a particular stimulation to me, and I will mention them. And then I have essays written by research students, which I assume to be PhD students, students from the master's degree, more numerous. And I think, unless I'm wrong, there was one essay written by a bachelor's student, at least one, and PhD students, colleagues whom I haven't graded, but whom I have expressed thanks to for sitting in my class, and 3 essays which I thought were written by colleagues, but they're written by PhD students as future colleagues, and so on. Let me begin with a sort of gentle and very loving teasing that 2 students, in by lack of time, handed in the same essay. But it's done clumsily because even the layout is the same and the fonts, I mean, the size of the characters is the same. So, you know, every line begins with the same word. So even with a these have been not graded, or they don't really make sense. So what I have learned from reading your essays, I believe in learning more than in imposing grades when one marks, is 6 points or 5 points of improvable dynamics and 5 points of definitive added value that I found in the essay. So the first point of improvable dynamic is that the essay suggested to read the SEO charter and to quote it and to mention it, or at least to make use of it, and very few only have done so. And when they have pointed to Article 1, Article 2, Article 3 maybe of the Charter. It doesn't mean the essays are not good. I mean, many essays, almost all essays are good, but I think this was a case, and I will keep my advice to the students, especially those students who have not yet chosen the PhD topic, to use the SEO Charter as a document that makes sense, as you might be using the UN Charter or your own constitution or your own treaties with other countries. It exists, it's not long, it's interesting, it's full of paradoxes, full of innovations. It's a good point. My second point of improvable dynamics is that some essays are lacking in terms of updates. They mention, for example, 8 member states, not 10. It's not going to make the essay bad, but it shows. I mean, the reader is aware that there is something missing there. So updates should be there in the sense that countries such as Iran, Belarus should be mentioned, but they have changed their status in particular. In one case, in one case, Pakistan is forgotten. So maybe this is part of the ongoing dynamic. We French like to forget England on occasions when we have a chance. So this is the same. But the updates of memberships and observer status and affiliates, I'm not obsessed with the exact detail. No teacher is. We teachers are interested in logics and in broad reasonings and so on and so forth. But sometimes not to be up to date is a source of weakness for the analysis. Not to be aware, for example, that among the new dialogue partners, there are so many countries situated in the Middle East, in the Arab world, and in the Indian Ocean, I think takes away the meaning of the present dynamic, even if one country is omitted. The third point is that in many essays I've found the expression Russia, China, India, and other states. So systematically I have written in the margin, mention Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, exclamation mark. That's the only sort of forceful things that I have done. Because not only are they not other states, but they are not lesser states, to quote my Chinese colleagues from some years ago. They are members, or they are affiliates, or they are partners. And they are actors in a new dynamic, which is the region building dynamic, where the concept or philosophy or perhaps illusion, but still, of one country, one vote, or one country equal significance to the construction is at the heart of the development. So if it's at the heart of the new philosophy, the new values, it should be mentioned as such. And my next point, which is linked to the third one, is that when you list countries, as my advice to myself and to recently I evaluated an article for a writer, and I made that point in the sense that it ought to be corrected, that when countries are listed, they ought to be listed by year or date of accession to a status, and within that year by alphabetical orders. So for example, member states list beginning with Belarus, I think it's not a good way of saying it. The list of members should be China, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, Tajikistan in alphabetical orders, then India, Iran, Pakistan, and then Belarus. So that the reader immediately has a sense of the time period implicitly that is concerned, and the same for observers and dialogue partners. Observers today, what should be mentioned is Mongolia, and then Afghanistan, even though it's M&A and so on and so forth. It's a small detail, but it makes the common culture of SCOists, so to speak, or SEO analysts, right. And the last point is the respective weights that should be addressed to the meetings themselves, the regularity of the meetings and where they take place, and the spirit of the organization. I think the two should be treated with equal relevance. The fact that the meetings take place at fixed intervals, once a year for the heads of states and twice a year for the prime minister and so on, does not mean that we should take them as so routine that they should be just briefly mentioned and not looked at. For example, it does have a meeting whether a meeting picks up immediately the rotating order, where it is held. Recently, whether it's online or not online has become a relevant point just for a few years. And as I said before, the capital city where it is, or the city where it is held. It does make symbolic, but little, it has a relevance whether the meeting takes place often in the same countries, but that's not relevant because there is a rotation system. But whether it's in the capital city or a provincial city. In the case of the UFA meeting, for example, 2015, typically the fact that the meeting was held in the same city as a few days before or after the BRICS meeting is relevant. So such things matter. But of course, the other point is the Shanghai spirit, or the major values and ambitions of the construction should be mentioned. So the other mistakes, not mistake, but sort of weakness, so to speak, is to privilege the technicalities of the meetings and forget the meaningfulness of the values, periods, ambitions, and so on. Now, the added values points that I've found, the things that I've learned in many, many ways, are the next 5 points. First of all, many essays use the concept of multi-alignment, not a very complicated one, but one that I was looking probably in my lectures and in my own analysis, so I'm going to use it now. The multi-alignment of a country. The concept is suggested to be relevant for India, and multi-alignment is what other countries call multi-vectorial, or multifactorial, or multidimensional. So these are terms which come in complement to multilateral, which has become multilateral, a routine term which is not meaningless, but which is not as usefully specified as when you use different concepts. So multi-alignment for India. Second point is in connection on the capacity to spell out to me India's reservations vis-à-vis the SCO, and some essays are very good in that because they really mention equally reasons for being reserved, attentive, waiting and seeing about the SCO, or skeptical about the capacity of the SCO to change much for India's foreign policy, and equally, perhaps with my pushing implicitly, trying to identify 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 reasons why India's, while being skeptical, can anticipate to gain from the SEO dynamic as part of a number of other dynamics. Of course, a number of essays mention 2 countries and 2 types of relations, India, China, India, Pakistan, or the Chinese-Pakistani axis as being one of the reasons why India should be hesitating, or one of the reasons why India should more constructively seek to balance out that axis with another axis. That's very clearly done in many, many of the essays. Many essays, penultimate point, explain how 2017 is a pivot date for India. Some essays go so far as to say, there's almost a pre-2017 diplomacy for India, and there is a completely different or substantially different diplomacy after 2017. So at least the point was driven home that date should be taken into consideration one way or another. I believe that the date does make sense, and that the date does echo changes in India's priorities starting in 2013, 14, 15, which contextually speaking are coincidental with the other initiatives of the Silk Road and so on. So there is, I believe very much in that, beyond the contextual analysis, the analysis of trying to spot the echo between certain dynamics. Countries, foreign policies, regions echo each other in their acceleration. Typically, I say to my students that the 1991 Maastricht dynamic in Europe was echoed in the 1991 formation of Mercosur in Latin America, 1993 launch of the NAFTA agreement in North America, and in macroeconomic terms, these were 2 early initiatives. The Latin American markets were not prepared for the Mercosur in many ways, and the Canada, USA, Mexico trade zone was not ready. The Mexican economy was not ready for that, but it was decided at that time in response or echo to the Europeans accelerating their own history. And the last point is that, of course, many, many essays remind me as a reader that India has other agendas besides the SCO, that India has a huge number of multilateral memberships, and so has alternatives too to the SCO or the New Asian dynamic as I've suggested it here. So I take the point at full value, and my response to that is to suggest that when a country has multiple options and alternatives, that should suggest in many ways that the one alternative, the SCO one, is really taken fully into consideration. Not kept apart because it is perhaps less relevant in some ways, but fully taking into consideration because it is not as challenging to the country's foreign policy options because the country, India in this sense, has other options to contemplate. So I was asked to call the names of students whose essay I find most conducive to my own learning. So this is, I don't know how to do this. There was an essay written by someone called Vaibhavi Gupta. Is that someone in the room? Yes? So there you are. So I say it's a brilliant account due to its concise exactitude. So it's not very long. It's not very long, but it's, so you want to take it now or? Okay.
And what's the grade?
Oh, A+.
A plus.
There is an essay called by Abhishek Yadav. Not in the room. So again, it's I said it's a bold and critical approach, which means in plain English, it's an approach that tells the teacher your topic is interesting, but you know I have more things to say. So, but it's well done, yes.
He also gets A plus.
A plus.
He's
Yes.
saying the A plus.
Yes.
Okay, this is the A plus.
Yes. The other one is Chandra Pratap Singh. Is that someone in the room? No. Okay. So the quality is due to the definitions and references that are used. An effort to define is something very academic, but something that is also useful. A plus. Rahul Dahiya.
Rahul.
Yeah, that's you. Okay. So I say succinct but thorough. The key word is but. It's short, but it's to the point. And so an essay is also good when it frustrates the teacher from more. You know, the teacher would like to say more. So in your case, references should be added. Nothing was preventing you from having footnotes and bibliographies, but not many of you did. And the last one in my group, but this is very imperfect sort of selection. But many essays are good. Is written by where's the name? David Singh Ratour.
No, they're not.
Not in the room. Online. Yeah. So I say a truly excellent essay, including an a contrario or a what if not counterfactual approach, which I found very interesting. So that's the next essay. But I should thank you for spending a weekend on the topic, and it was very pleasant reading on Tuesday afternoon and on Wednesday.
And the other grades are like A minus?
The other grades are really from, I think there is 1 or 2 B or B minus, I'm not quite sure, but it's basically from B plus to A, or even to A plus, but outside this group. But they're good essays, because you're good students. Sorry? Yes. So now for the, do we have a? I take my jacket off. May I?
Sorry?
May I take my jacket off?
Yeah, you can. Yes, this is bonus for the program.
So we have a few words now by the people. Thank you, Asma. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, friends. Everything has to end. Good things also end. As we come to the closure of this 10 days of profound intellectual engagement through this Gyan course, we begin the formal closure of this very important event. In fact, the JNU Gyan coordinator, Professor Patnaik, was to come. He had promised and he had every intention to come. But unfortunately, he's got caught up in another very important meeting. But he conveys his best wishes to all the participants the resource persons, and everybody else who have been working tirelessly to make this event a very big success. For somebody who was involved in this process that started in December 2023 with a chance conversation with Professor Patnaik in the lawns of the Delhi Lieutenant Governor's residence, where we had gone for an official engagement, we have indeed come a long way. It's a very emotional moment for me, and what I experienced today is a profound sense of gratitude, which to my mind is the most beautiful and powerful emotion that the human heart can hold. I'm grateful to the universe for aligning the right forces, the right energy, through the right kind of people here in India, in France, and in JNU to let this event manifest. I had said in the first day of the inauguration, what a wonderful way to start the new year, that too on the auspicious day of the beginning of the harvest festival across India. The energy of the season has ensured a flawless event characterized by intense intellectual conversations both inside and outside the classroom, cemented by bonds of friendship, old and new. Professor Patnaik, the local Gyan coordinator who would have been with us, but unfortunately is not there, is a very valued colleague. His team, our dear friend Saurabh, who has just entered the hall. I don't have words to thank you. Some emotions are best expressed when unsaid. Thank you so much for the rock solid support. My wonderful team in the Center for Russian and Central Asian Studies, my office staff, Amit, Sonu, and Arvind, have been my saviors, my heroes, who did all the heavy weight lifting from behind the scenes. And when you are blessed with such extraordinary colleagues, Rajan, Asma, and Dinesh, who have amazing qualities of the head and heart, life becomes such a joyful ride. Thank you, dear friends, for reading my mind and doing the needful even before I expressed it in words. What possibly can be an event without participants? My wonderful participants who have braved the challenges of the season, the cold, the rain, and the wind day after day to be here to attend this lecture series. My gracious colleagues, some of them have been here every single day to participate and to encourage. My student friends, some of them coming from outside Delhi, many joining through the online mode. I don't have words to express my gratitude to you. What we as teachers exist because you are there. What are teachers without students? We learn so much from you every single day as we interact with you. You are the oxygen. You are the oxygen of our existence. Your patience, your attention, and your engagement has been exemplary. You have been simply great. Thank you so much. Professor Shawal, our guest, resource person, and a course instructor. How do I describe him? Humility personified, wise, kind, and so learned, so full of humor. I myself had the privilege to attend all your lectures, sir, along with this wonderful group of students and other participants, colleagues. I also participated as an audience in your tutorials and have learned so much in the process. And the most important learning has been that it's so important to be a good human being in thoughts, words, and deeds. And it is quite a task to be one. No wonder it is said, to be human is not a fact, but a task. Thank you, Professor Shawal, for being such a good example. As someone who told me very recently, just 2 days ago, that teaching for him was like meditation. Teaching for him is meditation. Sir, we wish to be practitioners of your meditation, in fact, as good as you. Thank you for being here with us, for sharing your expertise and experiences and your friendship and time. We owe you a debt of gratitude. All in all, this has been such a happy and satisfying learning experience, a great event. Thank you, everybody who has made it happen, the GNU administration, the technicians, and everybody. Many, many thanks. Thank you. So since Professor Patnaik is not here to address us, I think straight away I would go to the course instructor, Professor Shawal, for your address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Well, emotions, so I should be able to cope with emotions. Namaste to all. Thank you very much. We forgot to define students as future professors and professors as former students, and some professors forget that they have been students. I don't. And all you go through, we've gone through, your teachers. Dear students, to begin with you, of course, dear intellectual assets of Eternal India, thank you. Thank you for your liveliness. Dhanyavad apake jevan tataka. Maybe some of you may think that the presence of a foreign colleague such as I is only a question of an invitation letter, an airplane hop across the continent, and a stack of lecture notes with also possibly a voice and face. But no, this series of lectures means 537 plus 1,000 plus 1,000,000. These lectures are the children of, first of all, 537 emails exchanged with Professor Upadhyay in the last 13 months, even more numerous WhatsApp messages, and third of 1 million thoughts, preoccupations and concerns, usually urgent, details to be confirmed twice or thrice a day. I wish every one of you one day to have the blessed chance to work with a person as my Professor Upadhyay, and to be made to feel instantly part of the family, interacting with 3 colleagues all with the same name, Kumar. So there is Rajan Kumar, Dinesh Kumar, and the young PhD student on Kyrgyzstan, I forget his first name. Suresh. People I have met over time, starting from February 2024 last year, and who have remained. And of course, I was made instantly felt as someone who matters, including on stage with my colleague, Professor Asma Kuze. Where is she? There. And I wish every one of you one day to have a chance to work with her as well as with you. Last Monday, in the opening of these lectures, I mentioned emotions, and they were mentioned again by you at the present time. And I keep the word, emotions that encompass all that I have been through. The attention repeatedly offered to me by SIS Dean Matu is an emotion. The attention spontaneously offered by the GEAN coordinator, national coordinator, Professor Patnaik, is an emotion. And the attention graciously offered by Ma'am Vice Chancellor Pandit last Monday, I think it was, in her office is an emotion. And so, it is a much loaded aeroplane that will take me back to France, an aeroplane carrying all these emotions, cherished as they shall remain in France as well as wherever I might be going next, or simply staying home. I have learned so much here. As I anticipated I would, I said so last Monday, I have learned first of all that no analysis is valid until and unless it has been put to the test of public presentation. And I have learned also, secondly, very much so, that everything, or at least so much, is a question of viewpoint. And so the question lingers on, does the SEO matter? Han, Nahin, is for you to answer. Dear students, dear staff members, dear colleagues, dear Professor Rachana Upadhyay and Asma Kuza, to everyone, the technicians, the TV technicians, were very quiet, but they are there watching over the expensive microphone, and the building's guardians who keep greeting me every day, every morning, as if I were a part of the family. All of you, have a good life. Jevanke Mazelo. Merci beaucoup et à bientôt. Thank you very much and till soon.
So friends, an event like this, a very important event like this, is incomplete, rather it's meaningless without our dear participants. So it's very important that I invite some participants to come and share their thoughts, their impressions, maybe for a minute or two. May I invite Muskan Kumar? He's a familiar face. His questions were outstanding. Please, Muskan.
Hello, good morning, namaste, and bonjour, Professor. I'll say these 10 days, I guess, in very crisp manner, if these, I guess, these have changed our academics, I would like to point out two particular points. One is that how crisply this particular 10-day course made us rethink of how we portray and imagine this particular Asia, which we call Central Asia, and now we have a reason to call it a new Central Asia. Second is which is more important is that how Professor Shabal, and let's not afraid giving him credit of how Professor Shabal made us rethink and gave us enlightened hope in the very framework of SEO, which can work towards the betterment of this new Central Asia, a new Central Asia which can say no, as Professor Shabal say. Long story short, how crisply it made us rethink on our discussions and thoughts, where we have discussed from politics to economy, from regions to security alignments, from energy to resources, and more particularly, as we have discussed, from preferences to implications, and implications towards a more peaceful, stable Central Asia. Last, I would like to thank Professor Shabal for these 10 days of engaging, wonderful, beautiful lectures. I would like to thank on behalf of all of us, our very dear sweet professor, coordinator, Ms. Archana ma'am, and everyone, all the faculty members, technicians working day and night behind the scene, behind the scenario, the volunteers and dear participants, everyone. Last but not the least, to Professor Shabal. Thank you, Professor Shabal. And also, to leave is to partly dying. Indeed, it is, Professor Shabal, but we say bye to meet again. And India is going nowhere, and neither is France. And I promise when we meet again, we will be providing you with more intriguing perspectives on India. Thank you, everyone. One really couldn't ask for 10 better days than what we really experienced. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Muskan, you are adorable. Thank you so much. I would like to invite Karina Khan. She's been one of the very, very regular participant, being here on time and staying till the end. Please, Karina, an absolute joy and pleasure to have you here and to invite you. Please, Aye.
Hello, everyone. And sir, on behalf of everyone, firstly, I wanted to say thank you. Thank you so much for the engaging and thought-provoking lecture series. Thank you for your admiration. Thank you for your dedication and for creating a good classroom environment with all the discussions. You have made a lasting impression and probably a permanent spot in all of our notes. Your ability to break down complex ideas and make them more accessible and interesting has been a game changer for many of us and definitely for me, sir. And let's not forget your sense of humor. You kept us thinking and awake. And on behalf of everyone, I just want to say how we truly appreciate your dedication, your passion for the subject, and of course, your patience with all of our questions. We'll carry what we have learned and we'll probably be quoting your lectures. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So before I invite my colleague, if there are students who would want to come here, most welcome. अभी तो स्टूडेंट को बुला रही हूँ. Nobody? Shy?
Now is the chance to say the truth.
Nobody? Okay. So then I request my colleague Dr. Raj Yadav, please.
I could have spoken from there.
No, wherever, but please come.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Dear colleague.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope I am audible.
Yes, you are.
I'm more than that. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, thank you so much, sir. A big thanks because I saw about you and I came to know about you only once, when we got some idea that we are going to have the conference on connectivity. And when I was searching, I saw your, that, you have conducted some conference in 2023, suppose. And I actually started, getting in touch with you. So, but since then, we requested ma'am that we want to discuss with Professor Shabar, and we got this, opportunity. So, ma'am, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, ma'am, of course, Chairperson, ma'am, for organizing this great initiative that is GYAN. And of course, this would have been incomplete without Professor Shibal, who has made this program a success in true sense. Sir, you made us understand New Asia from various perspectives. And these perspectives made us, these perspectives are going to made us to do some research on new dynamics, which will facilitate in fulfilling the true meaning of the word Gyan, that is knowledge. And of course, this is only possible through GYAN, that is, GIAN, Global Initiative of Academic Networking. So, sir, actually, we want you again and again. So please, in case, if you are going to come up with a book, please let us know and please give us opportunity. And we want you to have again and again. And thank you again. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to sir, you, and of course our dear respected member. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So yes. Yeah. So yes, paper anyways. So may I invite you, Rajan, to propose the word of thanks?
What about this?
Okay,
Yeah.
Pramod wants to speak. Yes, Pramod, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sir, thank you very much for enlightening us and encourage and valuable contribution that actually you have made our limited knowledge. First time I have seen you in 2023 September with Al-Farabi conference. I was physically there and you were online. And later on in our center that last year that we have conducted, ma'am have conducted this in the conference, and certainly it was a very rich experience, very rich academic and intellectual experience with you, and certainly the new insight actually that you have given to us, it is certainly will enrich our knowledge, and to be very honest, the concept of New Asia, it is the first time for me, even and certainly I'm fully convinced with your idea, and then certainly we will also look forward to to work on that also. And thank you is not a very, I mean, it's a very small word to, I mean, to express our gratitude. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you for your questions.
So may I request Rajiv to propose the vote of thanks?
और किसी को नहीं बोलना है कुछ?
No, please, please.
Hi, hello everyone. I think this lecture matters for several reasons, but if I look at from the IR perspective, you are all familiar with the American perspective, you are all familiar with the global South perspective. But in IR, if you look at from the global IR perspective, what matters and what is probably missing in the Indian discourse, because I teach IR, what is missing in the Indian discourse is the continental perspective. And if you know the theories of IR, you have realism, constructivism, and critical theory, etc. So the constructivism that originates in IR, that has the continental tradition. It borrows essentially from the philosophy which has emerged from, say, France and Germany. You have Anglo-Saxon world, which is the dominant positivist trend in IR, that is America, US, UK, and Australia, and a little bit of, sometimes New Zealand, etc. But what is missing in the Indian discourse is the continental philosophical tradition. So why Professor Shabal's lecture matter? And I was looking at from that perspective, that what is the philosophy that he's trying to project here, and that which would be different from, say, what you call American perspective, positivist perspective. America is dominantly positivist perspective. But the critical tradition and the constructivist tradition are including, Alexander Wendt, etc. If you read the book of Alexander Wendt, so he clearly says that he borrows from the philosophy of France, Germany, etc. History, philosophy, the way French scholars understand. And all of you are familiar with the great French philosophers, right from Montesquieu to Foucault to Descartes to a lot of other people that you already, Voltaire, etc. So I was looking at his lecture from that perspective, and whenever he was referring to terms like ontology, epistemology, counterfactuals, so these are the, they focus on terms, they focus on terminology. Unlike the American tradition where you focus on facts, and some kind of inferences, and that I teach in the research method. So, sir, thank you very, very much for bringing that continental perspective in the discourse. And as Pramod rightly pointed out, that you have thrown some interesting hypothesis where you have conjured up the term called New Asia, which again, I was skeptical in the beginning, but now I have a reason to believe why you proposed the term called New Asia, and the empirical and logical basis for saying that. So having said that, I would like to propose a vote of thanks formally, because I've been assigned the pleasant task of thanking each one of you. So first and foremost, of course, my mercy. French term for thank you is mercy. Yes. So mercy, Professor Shabal and Yushuk ma'am, for coming here, sparing time, giving 10 beautiful days to sharing your time with our students. And this has been a truly interesting experience for all of us. And he is extremely humble, and he is erudite, very scholarly, but at the same time very factual. And the difference that you might have found in his lecture compared to Indian lectures, the way we do it, that he is using a lot of map. Many times we don't do that. And not only map, teaching and research also means proposing new idea. Whether that idea would be accepted or not, that's not your responsibility. Many times you have to propose bold ideas, and that might be accepted or rejected. But taking the bold step is the duty of a researcher, and that you learned from Professor Sabal. So thank you, Mercy. Thank you so much. Yeah, I would like to thank our chairperson, Professor Archana Upadhyay. She has been amazing. I know the way she works. She is very, very meticulous. She is very organized, unlike me, who is very informal, very careless, casual. And one of the reasons I go along very well with her, because we are two extreme sides. So thank you, ma'am, for planning it so well, articulating it, and organizing this event where students of our center and also from outside they could interact with the learned scholar Professor Shawal. And she has been on this for the last 2-3 months, let me tell you, because many of you may not have seen her, but I have seen her. She was thinking nothing else except this. Rajan, I cannot talk to you till 24th of January. So it was that kind of dedication. It was that kind of dedication which leads to this kind of event. So thank you, ma'am. You've been very kind, and it has been absolutely enriching to not only to the center but also there are students from PGDA, we call it Delhi University, and there are several students who are online today, from all over India. And this was the most successful course until now, because already 89 students raised the limit. Yeah, the limit was 50. We were said that there has to be 50 students, and already 90 students registered, and we had to stop it. In fact, I'm not registered, let me tell you. If you're thinking that, so I'm also not registered because registration was just stopped after some time. Yeah, I also couldn't. I said no. They said the seat is over. You can't register. So I didn't register for that. So yeah, so very successful. Thank you, ma'am. And I would like to thank this JNU administration for facilitating. I'm sorry, I don't know many of the names, but Saurabh you, sir, thank you so very much. All our staffs. But before the staffs, I would like to thank our colleagues who are here, who joined the course, participated every day. In the winter from 9:30, it's not easy. Many of the colleagues come from outside. So I would like to take the names of our ma'am, Preeti ma'am, who is here. Ma'am, thank you for joining, coming. I would like to thank Vaishali. Vaishali is here. Thank you, Vaishali, for joining and coming here. Pramod, you are here. You spoke also. Asma, you've been sitting all through, and your dedication was amazing. So big round of applause for Asma. And Dinesh, of course. Dinesh has been very, very supporting to us. So thank you, Dinesh. Yeah, Raj, yes. Yeah, Raj. No, it's there. I'm coming. All the names are there. So yeah, Raj, thank you, and thank you, Dr. Raj. So Dr. Yeah, and Renu is here.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, why are you there? Thank you, Renu. Yes, so all of you, thank you for joining. Because when faculty is participating, that shows the intensity of the program. So thank you for joining. Also, the office staff, and today I'm not going to forget the name of Arvind. I always forget his name. Where are you, Arvind? Arvind, thank you very, very much if you're hearing me. And after that, Sonu and of course Amit, they have been very kind to us and very supportive all the time. So thank you very much. All the technicians, all the camera persons, everyone. I would also like to thank our Vice Chancellor, Professor Shantasri Pandit, our Dean, who is not here, but they have been supporting, kind, and all through with us. So thank you, everyone. And big thank you to all the students who made this event very engaging, lively. So big round of applause to all of you. So I'll stop it here. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for joining, and a great event. And I look forward to having this kind of event again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Haran.
Let's all assemble for a group photo.
Thank you for your
Husband.
excessively
Go
kind.
for
Thank you.
Yeah. Rajan, maybe a group photo. I think
Yes.
everybody will be here.
Okay.
And the students,
Standing or sitting?
yeah, standing or sitting, or maybe sitting.
Sitting. Okay.
And then somebody, please join for a group photo.